So, we had discussed about a certain stage where the sadhaka, with a lot of hard work, he sort of graduates from the first four stages of ekagrata, which is savitarka, nirvitarka, right? And these are focused on bahya, sthula, vishaya. Then savichara, nirvichara. And savichara is what? You are meditating on sukshma padartha, but with artha, sabda, jnana, vikalpahi. And also looking at time and space. And you're looking at the name and particular object, and as well as the knowledge of that object. Same with savitarka and nirvitarka. We have already discussed that earlier. And there are two more discussions we had about the meditation on the indriyas and the senses, which is called sananda. And there is something called sasmita. So the sasmita is a very high level. That is also considered to be grahya samapati, and the sananda, which is prakriti laya, right? And the sananda and the videha, sananda samadhi, they are called videha samadhi because they're kind of in a moment of great happiness during that particular thing is grahana samapati. And finally, the only meditation on that particular perceiver who is meditating on that self, which this is attributed, for example, to the gods and goddesses. They have that sasmita samadhi at will, and that sort of thing is also prakriti laya. I mean, that, because everything kind of merges at the end of the day in prakriti, the mula prakriti, because this particular samadhi is also karya rupa, is not ultimate liberation. We had discussed that. Now, he's saying is that when you perfect this nirvichara samadhi, there is a particular purity which sort of starts vibrating in your consciousness, and then you experience what is called Ritambara Pragya. Ritambara Pragya is a stage in which the consciousness is established in truth. That means it's not interested in the dualities of the samsara, the attractions, the temptations. It loses interest, becomes a superfine consciousness, very subtle. But remember, the Ritambara Pragya, Sanaji had asked this question and I answered in the group. It's not the ultimate stage. This is also a relative stage. Okay, compared to the normal state of consciousness that all of us pass through during our interactions with others or during normal meditations of the day or prayers and stuff like that. Ritambara Pragya is an extremely desirable, a very high, subtle state of being. A lot of people will aspire to be there. However, that is not the ultimate. What happens there is we explain this tesham sanskaranam avibhavat tat prabhavaha pratyaya na bhavanti. Once what happens is that, what it said earlier, all these dheya vastu samapanna samadhis, that whatever, they are weaker compared to the next one. So like savitarka is weaker compared to nirvitarka. Nirvitarka is weaker compared to savichara. Savichara is weaker compared to nirvichara because you are kind of dissociating yourself away from the falsity of our existence. And lots of false tadatmya, superimpositions, false identifications, false projections. There is this shouldn't be a distraction, but it's just coming to my mind. This Western philosopher called Gurdjieff, he called his philosophical or spiritual thing, he called the work. And if you listen to any YouTube videos or you look at any of his books, except that the person who sort of worked with him sort of moved away from him, Opensky, this Gurdjieff kind of talks about a consciousness where he says much of our problem arises because of projections and identifications, and you're kind of entrapped in all false things which have no relevance for you. And I personally think, I'm not saying that he's echoing the voice of Vedanta or Indian philosophy, but there is striking similarity if you look at what he says, at least with regard to the working of the brain. There are certain elements in his philosophical articulation of how the consciousness works, which has striking similarities with the way we look at it, the yoga and the Vedanta philosophy, regarding what is falsity and what traps us. Much of it is not so real as it appears to be. That is the mother of all our problem, right? Both in yoga and Vedanta, Sankhya and Vedanta. So what he's saying is that once you remove them, tesam sanskaranam abhivavat, once these sanskaras and the results of these earlier sanskaras are kind of submerged, प्रवाह प्रत्यय न भवन्ति, other things don't happen, ततः समाधिर उपतिष्ठते, ततः समाधिजा प्रज्ञा, ततः प्रज्ञाकृतः संस्कार इति नवो नवः संस्काराशयो वर्धते, ततस्य प्रज्ञा ततस्य संस्कार इति. So once you're established in the Ritambara Prajna, you know what? This new wisdom, new vision, new way of connecting with the external world, what does it do? It gives you, it gives you certain brightness, certain sharpness of perception, of connectivity. It's very intuitive. This is not about, again, doing pratyaksha, anumana, blah, blah, blah. No, nothing. It's just very intuitive. And what he says that this particular thing, because of the very purity of your samadhi, which you cannot get these particular truths, that secret, which you cannot get either through pratyakya or anumana or agama, shruti, or even nididhyasana, you learn to approximately go closer to it. Let's put it like this, because we haven't reached the ultimate state. It's saying that truth sort of appears in you, in your consciousness, when you so deeply meditate. You might mug up a lot of philosophical work, you'll not reach truth. That's what they say. Number two, anumana, logical work, deductions, logical, all kinds of proofs that you provide, that also will not take you beyond a certain point. That will not give you anything, because this will give you only samanya jnana. We have already discussed that. This is a minor digression. That if you are doing any inference, you're talking about fire because of smoke, you don't know what specific fire it is. So that again is a very samanya jnana. Similarly, nididhyasana, you're also meditating based on what you have studied and all. That also gives you some samanya jnana. None of this will give you vishesha jnana of the truth, of reality. That pratyaksha gives in a laukika vichara, in a laukika pratyaksha. So when you see a pen, you have the knowledge of a vishesha, specific pen, you know that. But what we are talking about, that distinction between Purusha and Prakriti and the secret of our existence, that is not, grahana yogya. That is absolutely impossible to receive it through meditation. It's not possible to receive it through meditation. When you are trying to go closer to it, when you are trying to go closer to it, that mental faculty of your logical inferencing or perception through your senses or reading of text, they don't help. Then he's saying that when that nirvichara samadhi gets sort of perfected, there is adhyatma prasada sort of perfected. There is adhyatma prasada because of your perfection of that technique. Then you sort of evolve because of your perfection of that technique. Then you sort of evolve to a higher level. And then what happens? There is that prakya, there is this intuition or that wisdom, whatever you call it, that particular refined consciousness. And this refined consciousness leaves some impression or imprint of it in your, that whole universe of conscious universe. Let's look at it like this. You are going to see, it's a little technical, but it's very beautiful to meditate on this. Let's get closer to it. You're with a particular friend, a very old friend, okay? You're just meeting. And then you had met him when you were children, right? You had grown up together. You're meeting him or her now, after 40 years or something. And you are together, you had lunch and this and that. And then you again, you go your ways. He goes back and you go back, and he or she lives his or her life and you do yours. You met once, there was a get together, alumni meeting or something, okay, right? Now this impression that you met again, and there was an impression that you had met earlier, and now you have there is a new sanskara. So this sanskara you had about that friend will now be painted over, will be tempered with this sanskara that you had when you met him or her again in an alumni meet. Let's put it like that. Similarly, when you haven't had any experience of that Ritambara Pragya, you have a certain experience of what is Siddhi and what is purity of your consciousness. you have reached there. Even when you are doing japa, when you are doing puja, you have some spiritual experiences. They are not material experiences for sure, because you are not doing anything significant materially. You're sitting on a chair away from everyone, not taking any phone calls. You have put it in whatever mode, non-reachable mode or meeting mode, and you're doing some serious meditation. You're writing something. The particular subjective reality that you experience leaves its imprint long after. Whenever you sit quietly and you remember, okay, I was in that particular guest house, or I was below that mountain, below a tree, and I was sitting, there was a river, and there was a boatman, there was no one. Just imagine that suddenly sudden thing appears in your consciousness. What you had passed through, the subtlety of that thing cannot be described, but it has left a certain sanskara, certain imprint on your memory. That equally applies to both good and bad things we do. And I'm happy that Neelaj had very beautifully summed up how all kinds of impressions are formed through our everyday life. Every day we have millions of impressions are coming, and of course those we do not notice, they come, hit us, and go back. There's something called in psychology, something called iconic memory, just few seconds. Most of the things we interact or we pass through in your conscious mind lasts about 48 hours. In long-term memory, only few get registered because there is some emotional connect, or there is some usefulness, or there's a particular biochemical state in which we try to remember it deliberately. And that's so most of the relevant things we don't remember. And a lot of irrelevant things stay in the mind because of, or there's a whole science, there's a whole lot of research going on regarding how memory works and how we remember things, right? These are all imprints. Now, what he's saying is in that Ritambara stage, that Ritambara Pragya stage, there is this Pragya and it has a few sanskaras. These sanskaras again give rise to that Pragya. So they become a kind of a cyclical process, mutually supportive and reinforcing each other. Very good state, but that's not the ultimate. Because now he will tell us how to leave that stage and even leave that beautiful state of existence in a subjective level, a beautiful conscious level of living, where he's saying, no, don't be satisfied. There's something even more refined, purer, subtler that you can experience. And then he goes, so tatastha sanskara iti. So there is a, it's like mutually reinforcing pragya and sanskara, very positive sanskara of that ritamara pragya, that state of being purely established in truth. That's a beautiful existence, subjectively speaking. And there you have that, sanskara which is created. It gives rise again to that intuitive wisdom or openness or whatever. So that attitude and that frame of mind, they sort of reinforce each other. Okay, that's how he has mentioned till tatasa sanskara iti. Then there is a doubt which the Purvapaksha or the intelligent student who has a habit of asking critical questions, and that's all of us. And why do we do it in our tradition? It is said that it's called sthuna nikhanana nyaya, that you want to sort of, shake the pole a few more times before you are sure that you have really established it, so that the cattle cannot run away with it or the horse cannot run away with it. That means giving strength to our understanding and argument so that our understanding is not weak enough or not vulnerable to be swayed away, pushed to instability because of a minor doubt or question thrown at us at a later point of time, so that we are well established in our sadhana, right? So we'll deal with certain doubts and questions. Nano bhavatu vyuthana sanskaranam atattva vishaya prajnajanithanam tattva matra vishaya sampragyata samadhi prajna prabhavaihi sanskarihi pratibandhaha tesam tu sanskaranam pratibandhaka bhavat ekagra bhumau eva savijaha samadhi syat natu nirvijo nirodha bhumau iti tatraha. The student, this is a long sentence and appears a little complex. So we'll try to break it up. What is this particular student is saying is, look here, it appears that it's much more easy and certain that Savija Samadhi is achievable and sustainable. But you are saying that there is something even beyond that. I don't feel very convinced about it because, I have a few questions in my mind. And what are those questions he has? He's saying, okay, because of the Bhuthana Sanskara, that for example, Kshipta, Vikshipta, Mudha, these are the Bhuthana. And then you have Savitarka, Nirvitarka, the initial yogic experiences, Savichar, Nirvichar, all this. Vithana Sanskaranam Atattva Vishaya Prajna Janitanam. So, as a result of this, whatever is born out of these Vithana state, when we are active, we are interacting, either Satvika or Rajas or Tamas, but we are Vithana Sthiti Samapanna. Tattva Matra Vishaya Sampragyata Samadhi Prajna Prabhavehi Sanskarehi. And then you experience with this Vitarka and Vichara, and then you are entering into that Sampragyata Samadhi. Once you do, in the sanskaras, you are saying the Ritamara Prajna gives rise to certain pure sanskaras, and these sanskaras again reinforce Ritamara Prajna. So there is a Sampragyata Samadhi happening there. Pratibandha sanskarehi pratibandha tesam tu sanskaranam pratibandha abhavat. But these particular sanskaras, because the other sanskaras, what is the pratibandhaka? This ritamara pragya. It's like one good example can be a lot of films show it, and a lot of moms complain about it. During like when the children are growing up. So if the mother she's not a working mother, she's at home, she takes care of the children, right? So whole day she's busy with children, she's taking care of it. When the dad enters the house, the child jumps onto the dad and she feels really ditched. She feels miserable. This guy is so selfish. I took care of him from morning. Now that the father enters the house, this baby is jumping onto him. Actually, the baby is jumping because he is not thinking he's superior. He finds something new. It's like a new doll, a new person. It's just change of a person that the baby is interacting with. But similarly, you have 5, 6 things in your life, but there is something which is precious. Once that particular thing comes, all other things become dull and irrelevant to you. And I was also mentioning that the boy is there, the computer is there, and he loves to play computer games. But he or she has a very caring, conscious, but at the same time, very vigilant mom. And the mom enters the bedroom where the baby or the boy or the girl is very fond of these computer games. Exams are nearby. Mother enters. They say, "How are you? Can I help you?" The boy jumps back onto his study table and starts studying as if he doesn't even know there's a computer. And maybe the grandparents or the dad, they're very little surprised the computer is there and it's on, but the boy is not even looking at it, as if he never knew there was a computer game, right? Why? Because the pratibandhaka is standing there. That pratibandhaka is that caring, affectionate, at the same time vigilant mom. And the boy knows what she can do if she gets upset with him. So he behaves nicely. So what happens is that when you have this Ritambara Pragya, that becomes a Pratibandhaka of all other idiocies which have gathered in the consciousness and they're removed. The student, the brilliant Purva Pakshi, is asking a very intelligent question. He's saying, look here, that I understand. But these particular sanskaras which are created during this Sampragyata Samadhi state or before that, the Ritambara Pragya stage, these sanskara and the pragya, they are mutually reinforcing. And there is no pratibandhaka for these sanskaras, right? Now you are saying there will be a higher samadhi, which is called Nirudha Samadhi or Asampragyata Samadhi. Now tell me, show me the text or give me the arguments. Like the Ritambara Pragya is a pratibandhaka for all other previous sanskaras, like the desire for ice creams, the desire for reading a book, the desire for parting with an old friend, or the desire for doing anything you love during your Kshipta, Mudha, Vikshipta stages, or Sabitarka, and other stages. All those sanskaras are kind of rendered nullified, they're cancelled out by the presence of this Ritambara Pragya. And however, the sanskaras produced by the Ritambara Pragya, which reinforce reproduction of that Pragya, And the pragya again leads to new impressions. They are in a jolly well, there's a nice balance. And do you think there is some higher state which is a pratibandhaka for this? Then how can I get rid of those sanskaras? Therefore, let's settle that only savija samadhi is what is attainable. If you're saying that asampragyata samadhi or nirvikalpaka samadhi, which Swami Vivekananda attained with the grace of Thakur Ramakrishna Paramahansa, today is his Janmatithi, all prayers at his feet, can we ever attain? That's a joke. Let's not waste our time. That is what he's saying. That let's not waste our time over silly matters. It appears very clear based on whatever the Shastra, the Yoga Sutras say. There is a pratibandhaka for the lower level sanskaras. There is no pratibandhaka to eliminate or delete or delimit or render useless the sanskaras produced by Ritamara Prajna. Therefore, you cannot go beyond this stage. That is his doubt. Then Tatraha, the teacher, the Sutrakar himself, he is very compassionate. So he listens to the student and smiles and says, Tasyapi nirodhe sarva nirodhat nirvijaha samadhihi. My dear friend, Tasyapi nirodhe, these sanskaras and these pragya which are mutually reinforcing, and you are experiencing a great, happy, peaceful state, but that's not the final thing. If you want to experience beyond where you have reached till now, tasyapi nirodhe, this particular stage of sanskara, you have to also go beyond this. You have to abandon it. You have to do nirodha. You have to stop it. Then, it's such a good thing. Why do you stop it? He's saying nirodhe sarva nirodhat. Then you stop everything else. Because this is the most subtle, refined sanskara which is remaining in your consciousness. And a beautiful attitude or peace that you're experiencing. But you have to also go beyond that. This is the wealth that you have attained. And a hell lot of siddhis that are available already. Anima, Lagima, hell lot of siddhis you will get. And that fellow is not affected by it. That's how he has come to Ritamara stage. But he's saying, tasyapi nirodhe sarva nirodhat. Everything else can be stopped if you stop this. Nirvija samadhi. So you reach the ultimate stage. That is Sutra Prathama Samadhi Pada 51. Dasya sampragyatasya samadhi ekagra bhumijasya. When you can stop that sampragyata samadhi janya, born out of this savija or sampragyata samadhi, right? So, or sapekya, something which takes a dheya vastu, that is the only difference between, this asampragyata, sampragyata. Sampragyata, there is an awareness of the self and there is a dheya vastu. There is something that you are meditating on. It is kind of dependent on a point of meditation, an object of meditation, but you are also removing it. Then what remains? He's saying, Tasya samadhir ekagra bhumijasya api sabdat shipta mudha vikshiptanam api nirodhe yogi prayatna visheshana vilesati sarva nirodhat samadhe samadhijasya sanskarasya api nirodhat nirvijo niralambano asampragyata samadhi bhavati. So he's saying, look here, all the wealth, all the savings, all the investments, all the good sanskaras, which you love, which you want to revisit, by meditating, by remembering, or by benefiting from those siddhis and whatever. Shipta, Mudha, Vikshipta. That is what? The Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva. Those stages also, you had some sanskaras and whatever. You abandoned that. Then you have this Ritamara Pragya stage, Sampragyanta Samadhi, also you abandon that. Then what remains? When you remove everything and you abandon everything, both samadhi and that samadhi's byproducts, whatever sanskaras and impressions produced out of that, the memory of pleasures, the traumas, pains, frustrations. In a way, you see, the beauty of our spiritual tradition is that they are not telling us that try to forget your pain and agony. Sorry, this is a small digression, but I'll stop it. They're not asking, try to forget your trauma, we'll heal you. No. They are not also selling that you sacrifice and try to remember all the good days you had and try to be happy. That is what is the pop psychology people do. Why are you so sad? Haven't you had a few good days in your life? You have a few good days in your life. And why are you unhappy in a relationship? Haven't you spent time together? Haven't you been very happy with each other? And you are remembering only quarrels. That is the normal level. These people are saying completely different. He's saying, look here, whether you have a few memories of a few quarrels, heated arguments, or discomfort, or memories of lovely hours you have spent together over over a trip to a beautiful, scenic, beautiful place. You had a beautiful boat ride or something, or you had a trekking at the foothills of a beautiful mountain. All those beautiful memories, whether pleasurable or a little saddening or traumatic, all these sanskaras are kind of binding. They are sort of shadows of what you're looking for. You're looking for ananda. These are shadows of ananda. You are able to experience something much higher provided you refine your consciousness, where it shall not crave for these pleasures that you think are lovely and desirable, and shall not grieve against memories that you call saddening. What are they saying? They're saying, look here, it's that mud in which you're standing, because of which your consciousness is getting stained again and again. So instead of trying to clean yourself when you are very much in the mud, can you have this decision that you are planning to come out of it? Does it mean you are saying goodbye to samsara? No. This was a question also raised by Neil. No, it's not that. This whole vritti in Vedanta becomes badhita once you have understood what it is. Let me put it like this. You had a friend, okay, and you loved him or her very deeply, and he or she ditched you, right? And you got to know it. But then he's a human being. He has a few more good habits, and you respect him or her for that. And then you know that fellow is in need. He calls you up. He had ditched you, remember. He or she had ditched you. You had been very sad. And then what? He calls you up. He's saying, my mother is in hospital. So can you help me? I need somebody to come and help me take my mother to hospital. I'm not very well. What do? You go and take. Do you fall in love with that fellow again? No. That stupidity you shall not do. I mean, you can do it, but you shall not do if you're wise. What are you doing? You are doing a very compassionate, loving act of kindness towards somebody whom you value as a human being, irrespective of the past. The past is there, the good things are there, bad things are there. But you are now doing an act out of not any emotional attachment, but out of a certain moral disposition, a certain wisdom you have. This fellow wasn't good, fine. But I am a better fellow because I have understood what this relationship was. I'm wiser by the day. And I'll help that fellow because I'm a better human being. Similarly, when a particular this whole Vedanta thing, say for example, you have studied a lot of philosophy, you have done a lot of meditation, a small little baby is laughing at you. Don't you smile at her? That baby is crying. Don't you feel sad for her? You feel all that. Otherwise, there's no meaning in our lives. However, where you don't get affected is that your ability to understand the futility of whole lot of engagements around it is so severely true with you that you don't get trapped in an emotion. So you're like a fish which cannot be held by hands by Prakriti. So you're like, what do you call it? You're like a person who has taken a bath in oil and he's going and people are trying and he's playing kabaddi or some kind of a game, a physical game. People are trying to hold him. He slips away. That consciousness becomes very smart. So it becomes badhita. It's like the scientist looks at the sky continues to look blue. The scientist knows it has no color. but it continues to relish the beauty of a blue sky and writes a lovely poem early morning. He can do it. It's a beautiful spring sky. He writes a lovely poem. How blue it is. It's infinite. And it reminds me of the color of Lord Krishna. He can write that poem. However, he knows the sky has no color. That is how this particular this yoga sutras, and the beauty of this whole discussion in our everyday life is that telling us about secrets as to how we can gradually shift our attention away from whole lot of things we'll continue to engage with. You will continue to do your job, take care of your children, love your friends, your spouse. That all we will do. However, at the same time, having time for some sadhana every day and prayer and meditation, you will also at the same time experience a certain subtlety of your consciousness. So you'll be somebody who is here and not here. I mean, if you say I'm here, I'm not here, the other fellow might feel completely you're very rude and you're insensitive, you're apathetic. These are the words they will think because they want people to get trapped in a relationship, in a situation. But you can be a person. You'll be a smiling, friend, smiling parent, a smiling, employee. At the same time, you know actually that these are limited stuff, and your mind, your heart is somewhere else. And that is like a beautiful sentence in which Siddharth is talking to Kamala, who is actually a sex worker, right? And he visits, and she sort of wants to know from him, why do you come to me? And then Siddharth says, I come to you because I have seen that you are a very unique person, because I have found out that there is an inner sanctuary which is hiding in your heart, where you enter anytime at will. What is he talking about? It's very metaphorical. So this, if you look at the life of Pamela in the book Siddharth of Hermann Hesse, her life is like life of all of us, where we are engaging with a lot of transactions we don't want. But there is an inner sanctuary of meditation, of swadhyaya, of reading, where we must find an opportunity to return where others cannot disturb us. And that sanctuary is not a physical location. Yeah, you need some privacy. It's not a physical location. This is within. It has no, it's without location actually. This is a pure, subtle, refined existence which is very secret. No one knows about it. And we can return there. And that is the place where we actually recharge our lives. If we can have those few moments where you are able to write a few lines, your diary, maybe paint a little, maybe write a poem, or just sit nicely in a garden or take a walk. But these are moments much more precious than hours we spend on a hell lot of other things which have no relevance from the subtler from the perspective of subtler requirements of the self. Okay, if I put it. So now I just, sorry for the distraction, I'm just coming back. So who is saying is that, so this Nirodhat, when you stop everything, then you enter into the Nirvija Samadhi, when you remove all the sanskaras of the Kshipta, Mudha, Vikshipta, as well as the Sampragyanta Samadhi, which means that all these four other stages, Vitarka, Savitarka, Nirvitarka, Savichara, Nirvichara, when you remove the sanskaras, not physically, you cannot remove them, but they become abhivava. That means they become, they become non-apparent. They are there, but they don't make any noise anymore. They will lie low in the unconscious, right? So then you have what is called Nirvija Samadhi. Such a sopaya prak sutritaha virama pratyabhyasa purvaha sanskara shesho anyaha. So there is this sutra number 18th in Samadhipata of Patanjali. What he says there is like this, that thus this particular sutra is like this, that Virama Pratyabhyasa Purvaha. That means what? Virama Pratyabhyasa Purvaha. This ability to stop doing Virama, putting a full stop on these activities of the sanskaras and all the mental proclivities and the associations and movements of the mind. Purvaha. What is that Karana Purvaha? Purvaha is Karana here. What is the cause? These are the causes These are the means of reaching a particular samadhi. That is sampragyata samadhi. That is purva. And then sanskara sesho anya. The other one, which is the asampragyata samadhi, that is sanskara sesho. That means there is only a very, I'll explain what it means. Madhusudana Saraswati has been very kind to explain it in a beautiful way. What happens is this whole mental process, because consciousness keeps working. It's not a piece of stone or something, right? It keeps working. So it will continue to function. And if it functions, what happens? There are certain sanskaras will be reproduced. However, these sanskaras are absolutely having nothing to do with any subject matter. Think like that. So they absolutely have nothing to do with any subject matter. They get produced, they stay there, and they evaporate. He's referring to that sort of a thing. So that also is a dynamic state. And then he's saying, ultimately, if you set fire to a piece of wood, okay, and then the wood starts burning, and that particular act of setting fire also becomes the cause of eliminating that fire. How? Because that fire burns up the whole wood, and then there is nothing to burn. And what happens? There is no fuel. So if there is no fuel, the fire, what happens? It gets put out on its own. So it dies. Similarly, the mind, sort of, it will have this dynamic process of repeating itself. That is the word he had mentioned earlier, Prashanta Vahita. That is what is the Bhagavad Gita, and he's taking us there through a long detour, enriching our understanding of the whole process by bringing in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. He's so compassionate. He's doing a great favor to all of us. So when we go on that path, at the end of the day, sanskara seso anyaha. There are only these mild impressions created out of sarva nirodha. When you stop everything else, this whole abhyasa of sarva nirodha, when it becomes perfect, and then this impression, mild impressions, nothing. There is nothing. Then that particular sanskara is reproduced again. There is nothing. There is nothing. And there is what? There is that particular consciousness that all remains in the end. And then that sort of, whether it is there or not, no one knows, because that human subject who is meditating is not even aware of it. So that becomes Nirvija Samadhi at the end of the day. And there is so much of literature on this. I'm just trying to speak in a very layman's language. Okay. Then this particular Sacha sa upayaha, with upaya, with the means. This is mentioned in Sutra number 18 of the first chapter. And what is the upaya? Virama pratyabhyasa. Right? And what is virama? Viramyata anena iti viramaha. By this we stop something, and therefore this is called a virama. Vitarka vichara ananda asmidadi rupa chinta tyagaha. So you know what is virama here. What is the end? What kind of termination? You are a terminator here. You are meditating and you are the terminator. What are you terminating? You are doing all the pratyaya or abhyasa, all the meditations, all the mental dynamics of the processes that you lovingly practiced and entered into to experience some subtlety of meditation. First savitarka, nirvitarka, then savichara, then nirvichara, then sananda and sasmita. Right? Grahana samapatti, meditating on the perceptual process itself, and that and then sasmita is meditating on that particular self who is meditating. All this, you do chinta tyaga. You stop thinking about whatever beautiful experiences you had, you just leave, abandon them. Okay, chinta tyaga. Tasya pratyaya karanam param vairagyam iti yavat. And this asampragyata samadhi, do you know what is the means? Because he has to mention some means. Otherwise, you cannot reach there. So what he said that for sampragyata samadhi, what is the particular thing that you have to do? That's abhyasa. You know, this virama pratyaya abhyasa. This is what you have to do. You know, because vairagya abhyasabhyam, right? Tannirodha. So vairagya and abhyasa. So abhyasa is largely referring to Sampragyata Samadhi. But here he's saying that Tasya Karanam Paravairagya. There is a particular thing called Paravairagya. One is Aparavairagya, it's slightly inferior. What is superior Paravairagya? Guna Vaitishtya, absolutely no interest in anything. Aparavairagya is okay. You are trying to move one to get another because you are salambana. You are meditating on something. So it's like, it's like, say, let's imagine anything. It's like you are a bike lover. Okay, take that example. So biking, you love biking early morning or late night. Now what happens? You have one bike and your parents or your wife or your husband, whatever, they shout at you, don't do it. You change it. You say, okay, I'm buying a safer one. Then you're saying, no, but this one also is speed limit is about 240 kilometers, not good. You abandon it. Then you buy one, 180 kilometers speed. You're saying then you buy one which is higher speed limit, but then there is wonderful braking system or something. So you keep convincing. So you're just you're abandoning one bike for another bike, right? So these sort of things, similarly here, you're doing Chinta Tyaga because these are all salam, depending on something, some particular object of meditation, you're saying drop all that, right? So Virama cha aso pratyas chitta vritti vishesa itiva, or by Virama, Paravairagyam, how can you say Virama and that pratyaya, that itself is Virama. There is a karma dharaya samasa he's doing. So Virama cha pratyas chitta vritti vishesa, that particular way of the mind, that particular state of the mind or dynamics of the mind, if I can. I mean, there are no perfect words to capture that. So that particular thing can also be called Virama Itiva, Tasya Abhyasaha, and you practice that Paravairagya. Remember, all other Abhyasas earlier were Salambana. Remember, this is technical aspect, dependent on something, some Dhyaya Vastu. There is a point of meditation, starting with maybe a deity of Durga or Vishnu or Jesus or whatever, and then slowly you're just only Murti, no Guna, no name, nothing, and then you are saying, no, I will only meditate on Tattva, and then again without time and space, Nirvichar. Then you are going the Tamara Prakya stage, right? And Sananda Sasmita also you have had. So what happens is here, Paravairagya, that means not showing interest, completely Guna Vaitushnaya. You're not interested in any of these things. And what you're just practicing that very, you can call it a very harsh experience, but this is a very higher level of Vairagya, Paravairagya. You practice that. Pauna punyena chetasi nivesanam tadeva purvam karanam jasya sa. And then what happens is this particular Paravairagya, when you do this particular meditation, of which this particular thing, that asampragyata samadhi, sa tatha sanskara matra se saha, everything else is gone. Then what is there? That consciousness is telling, no, actually there is nothing. I can see nothing. There is nothing. Actually, I can see these words will not even say. This may be nothing. This void, or maybe it's pure. There is nothing, though no words, nothing. It's just that particular sanskara is remaining at the last moment. Sanskara is sarvatha nibritiko anyaha. And this particular thing is nibritika. There is no britti here. There is no association. There is no further entrapment. Purvaktat savijat vilekshana. And this particular kind of nibrittika state or sthiti of the mind is different from sabrittika, savija samadhi, which was earlier. There were a few mental dynamics going on. There was a particular object of meditation. Nirvijo asampragyata samadhi ityarthaha. And then we have reached that ultimate stage. When you reach that by practicing paravairagya, then asampragyata samadhi is experienced. Sampragyata sehi samadhir do upayau ukto abhyaso vairagyam cha. He's saying only of sampragyata samadhi. When the Yoga Sutrakar says samadhi do upayo, there are two means, two measure ways of reaching there, which is called abhyasa and vairagya. So what is he trying to tell us here? No, the kind of vairagya which is mentioned at an initial stage is referring to sampragyata samadhi, and that is not paravairagya. That is apekshika vairagya, apara vairagya, lower level of vairagya. Of course, that doesn't allow going to films or partying till late, or maybe taking a lot of food or drinks or whatever. You are much more sattvika. You have gone beyond the vikshipta state. very superior integrated life. Even then, that is paravairagya. Why? There is this desire of the mind to experience something good. And that desire is there in a very subtle form. And then you are at the Ritamara Pragya. Beautiful thing. That's all fine. But still, it's dependent on an object of meditation. And he'll tell you, even in Asampragyata Samadhi, even there are also chances that you may return to this earth and earthly entrapments. He'll explain that. Sampragyata Sihi Samadhi, do upayu उक्तौ अभ्यासो वैराग्यं च तत्र सालम्बनत्वाद अभ्यासस्य न निरालम्बन समाधि हेतुत्वं घटते इति निरालम्बनं परवैराग्यम् एव हेतुत्वेन उच्यते. What he's saying is that because this abhyasa and vairagya, this particular vairagya practice at the intermediate stage, that is at the stage of sampragyata samadhi, this is salambana. There is something you're depending on. How are you removing your mind from the external world? By meditating on a sthula dheya vastu, or arthamatra dheya vastu, or sukshma vastu, or samaya kala, desa kala, anavachhinna. Removing it from time and space, you are meditating on the sukshma arthamatra nirvija samadhi. Saritambara pragya also you have reached. However, remember, you are removing your mind or consciousness from everything else with the help of another thing. And that means what? It's not independent. It's dependent on something. However, this paravairagya, you are not dissociating from anything because you are not associating with anything. I mean, this is a word play, but please look at it. You are not trying to dissociate from anything because you don't plan to associate with anything. You are completely overlooking this whole process of whether to associate with one by dissociating from others. No, that has ended. Now you are only stopping everything else. No associations whatsoever. Not association with God or goddess or anything. There is no association. This is all freedom. You're essentially meditating on the consciousness at a very high level. That sanskara matra, that particular process, the impression, which has no color, no name, no form, no future, no past. It all repeats itself, right? And then he's saying abhyasa. So, it's like if you look at a person who's in deep coma, I'm just giving, this comes to my mind as an example. And if you go close to him and you look at his ECG, it's very frightening. Huh? If you have ever attended to anyone in the ICU, you don't even know if the patient is alive or gone. And you keep looking at that ECG and that particular thing, that electronic panel on which there's a beep, boom, boom, and you know that fellow is alive. And that whole ECG becomes straight line, then you know he's gone. So you're just looking at that particular, this whole, wave which is going on. The heart is beating, something is going on in him. Similarly, in the brain, imagine in this particular Niruddha Samadhi, there will be some waves, that they'll be almost like a straight line, very minor modifications without any significance to be noted. It's like that, if I can capture it in a very layman's language. Then, asampragyata se abhyasastu sampragyata samadhi dwara pranadyo upayujyate. Then this abhyasa is actually saying by abhyasa you should understand sampragyata samadhi only. Okay? And then this is all useful. Like in Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan is saying you do karma. That is also moksha, prapti karana. In what sense? Paramparaya. Learning alphabets is also a cause of getting your PhD, isn't so? Because if you don't know alphabets, you cannot write your PhD thesis. In that sense, this asampragyata and all this abhyasa, paramparaya, is also karana of this niruddha samadhi. Taduktam trayim antarangam purvebhyaha. So this is sutra, the third chapter, Vibhuti-pada, 7th. What he's saying is, what are those traya? Dhyana dharana samadhi. Okay, dhyana dharana samadhi is the last 3 of the steps of Ashtanga Yoga, right? First is Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara. So these are the first 5. When you have these 5, you have done, you have succeeded, then you are trying Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi, right? Now, this Dhyana, Dharana, Samadhi, Sadhana Trayam, Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Rupa, Sadhana, Panchaka, apekshaya savijasya samadhehe antarangam sadhanam. So he's trying to explain what is antaranga, what is bahiranga. And before I go there, I just want to give a small example which will make it easy to understand. So it's like in your classroom, you have a friend, and it's a boring, lousy, cloudy day, and a lot of people haven't turned up at office or in your classroom. So there's a guy or a girl with whom you're not very friendly, but he's around. So you're saying, okay, there's no one. Well, I'm going to the library. Are you coming? He says, okay. When you go to the library, you study. Now it's time for lunch. Whom are you going to have lunch with? You're not a great friend with that person. But then you say, I'm going for lunch. Are you coming? And you very nicely talk or lots of things. And you're warm. You have a lunch. Then what happens when you're coming back? Then another friend who is maybe your group, who is having your subject, he sort of shows up, he or she. Then what do you say? Hi. And then you go sit next to that friend, right? Because she or he is more antaranga. Then what happens is that you're having some good thing, and then what happens is you get a call from your mom saying, I'm standing outside. What do? You just say bye, and you run to your mom. I'm talking about school days, okay? I'm not talking about grown-up days where the child might say, no, I'm sorry, I'm in a meeting or something. Ignores the mother. That's possible. I'm talking about the child runs back to the mother. Why? Because, mother is the word for the child. And then that boy or girl goes home. Similarly, these sadhanas, yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, and pratyahara, they are antaranga for ekagrata compared to building a house, writing a particular thesis, or building a relationship. These are antaranga. However, if you are comparing these with sampragyata samadhi, dhyana dharana samadhi, compared to these first five, are antaranga, means dearer, closer, right? Antaranga. And then what he's saying is okay, antaranga sadhanam. Sadhana kotoja samadhi sabdena abhyasa eva uchyate. So he's saying in sadhana koti, this savichara, nirvisar, all the samadhi sabda that I'm using, no, please don't confuse that samadhi as samadhi. The samadhi, these are samadhis. The samadhi is the nirvikalpa or nirodha samadhi, which is the ultimate goal of all this. Mukhyasya samadhi sadhyatva, because that is the goal of us. The samadhi is what we are working to achieve. These are samadhis. And what are these? If you are saying this is not the samadhi, yeah. So these are called samadhis, but actually these are abhyasas. These are certain habits that you're cultivating to purify, to refine your consciousness. That is what he's saying. And then what sadhana? Okay. Then sadhyatvam. Tadapi bahirangam nirvijasya. And then he says, that this dhyana dharana and samadhi, this beautiful dhyana dharana and samadhi word is a sadhana rupa, right? That's why he's saying that dhyana dharana samadhi, the samadhi word mentioned there, is actually a means, because the ultimate samadhi is a sadhya, not a sadhana. And Ashtanga Yoga, these are the angas, right? These are steps. How can the goal be a step? The goal is different from the step. So the step called samadhi is one abhyasa, whereas the goal called samadhi is the end point that we are going to reach, and therefore he's saying tadapi bahirangam nirvijasya. So these dhyana dharana samadhi, these last three steps in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, the Ashtangas of the yoga, the last three are antaranga for savija samadhi, for samprakyata samadhi, but bahiranga for asamprakyata samadhi or nirudha samadhi. Why? Because Niruddha Samadhi doesn't require these abhyasas. What it requires? Paravairagyam. The ability to dump everything, not associate, not look for anything. That is all about Vairagya. So you might have all this. And then he will explain what are the problems. If you don't have that Paravairagya, try to achieve it. Or if you have it, but there are certain shortcuts you have followed, what are the problems? I think Sanandji had asked this question there as to how long it takes and can we reach there. So he explains this. Nirvajasya tu samadhir tadapi trayam bahirangam paramparaya upakari tasya tu paravairagyam eva antarangam ityartha. So these three are vahiranga for nirvija samadhi, because what is the antaranga sadhana? What is the nearest step that you must ascend to reach This nirvija samadhi or a vairagya, ultimate vairagya, detachment, I mean, what do you call it? Free from any entrapment, anywhere in the consciousness. Ayam api dvidho bhava pratyaya upaya pratyayascha. And this nirvija samadhi, this niruddha samadhi, asampragyata samadhi, which is the highest stage, is also divided in two. See how complicated he's making it for us, right? He's saying that, okay, if you do this, you get a promotion. Then he's saying, okay, am I going to be the CEO? No, no, we have a position called director. Then you're saying director. So next time president, he says, no, no, you will become group director. Then he'll say, additional chief director, something, he'll just keep you at some level. He's not declaring you as the president. Similarly, he's saying, I am apiduvido bhava pratyaya upaya pratyayascha. So there are again two pratyayas and two states of the mind experiencing the reality. One is bhava pratyaya, samsara. Okay, there is a dangerous word coming in here. The other one is upaya pratyaya. Okay, bhava pratyo videha prakriti layana. This is the Sutra 119, Samadhipada, first chapter, 19. What he's saying is, bhava pratyaya is experienced by people who are entering into the Niruddha Samadhi via Sananda Samadhi, or they are at a very refined state of Sananda Samadhi. They are what? They are called Videha. And there are people also Sasmita Samadhi, that Prakurtilaya, right? So these Sasmita and Sananda Samadhi Praptanam is saying Videhanam, Sanandanam, Prakurtilayanam, Sasmitanam, Devanam, Prag Vyakhyatanam, Janma Vishesa, Ausadhi, विशेषान मंत्र विशेषा तपो विशेषाद्वा यह समाधि sabhava pratyaya. You see the danger? You had asked, is it because even Ramakrishna had mentioned one might take ages to reach a particular samadhi, one might take a few minutes. He had mentioned one can, this is the drop of an eyelid, one person might enter samadhi. Depends on what are the sadhanas you have done in our previous births. So, it's like somebody takes a long time to do math, someone else is very fast with it. So it's same thing here. Now what he's saying is that these people who are Sananda or Sashmita and they have entered this, they are likely to experience what's called Bhava Pratyaya. And you know what are the danger and how they reach there. He's saying this Sasmita Devana, generally the celestial beings, very easily there in the Sasmita Samadhi. And he's saying what? Because of Janma Vishesha, maybe they have done a lot of siddhis earlier and they are born to a great yoga master. Okay? Or like someone meets Ramakrishna at a young age who sort of blesses him and transforms his life. These things are possible, isn't it? But ultimate end is in your hand. It is not going to be sustainable. Guru's grace, but grace is a big thing. So what he's saying is that Janma Vishesha, then also the Vishesatva. So he takes some medicine, let's imagine, some jari buti to Brahmi or Sankapushpi or Ashwagandha. He takes all kinds of medicine available to sharpen your mind. A lot of people actually, why go all this way? You can try, some people do marijuana and stuff like that, right? Like you have heard, this Aldous Huxley and gang, Carlos Castaneda and all, they experience what? They have mentioned. What are the impacts of psychedelic drugs? And if that is the only way to enlightenment, then enlightenment is not enlightenment. It's just altering your consciousness through biochemical means. And he's saying that, you see, what is the dangers of that sort of samadhi he's explaining here. And then mantra vishesat, somebody does a Kali mantra or something, he does a siddhi. The dangers of that, I tell you, he explains here. Vishesatva ya samadhi sabhava pratyaha. You know what is the danger? As soon as that samadhi is over, he comes back to samsara. He cannot stay there. That's not a permanent stage. He explains. Bhava sansara atma anatma viveka bhava rupaha pratyaha karanam dasya satatha. Bhava pratyaya is what? There is that viveka between what is atma and anatma. This is a Vedanta language is entering. The other yoga commentators have a different view. But we are doing it in a Vedantic tradition. He's saying bhava pratyaya is sansarika Atma Anatma, that Nitya Nitya Vastu Viveka. What is Nitya and what is Anitya? That wisdom he doesn't have. But he has done a lot of meditation. Without the benefit of the Upanishads or Gita or anything, he hasn't read. He's done a lot of meditation. What happens? He goes to a superfine state He can even tell you our past and future, all the siddhis can he have, but remember, it will not stay for a longer period. Actually, it's true. I'm not saying this, a lot of other people, you must have also seen it with a lot of other people. Till you have jnana, a clear understanding what life is, these superior alterations of the consciousness is not going to last too long. So if you do either because of medicine, you take some herbal or whatever, it could be marijuana, it could be anything, or plain alcohol, any tablet or anything to alter your consciousness. Janma Vishesha, because you are close to a guru or something, or mantra, you do a lot of sadhana, mantras, right? Then, but the vivek isn't there. What is right, what is wrong? What is the lines of Upanishad? What is the philosophy? What samsara is all about? That jnana, that sadhaka doesn't have. What happens to him? Janma matra hetrukava pakshinam akasagamanvat punah sansara hetutvat mumukshvi heya ityarthaha. He's saying, you know what janma hetu? Like the bird. He's born as a bird. He has wings, right? Unlike us, that bird can fly. It goes to the sky. Does it stay there for long? No, it goes back to the branch. And it's shivering in cold, and it's fighting heat by sort of jumping into, flying to the river or taking a dip. You see all that? It's also miserable. It looks very superior to us when it is flying because we cannot. But there are other levels of existence, maybe, where you are better off than a bird, isn't it? So, like the bird might take a leap into the blue sky. You remember that song I'm reminded of, this Moody Blues, right? Blue bird flying high. You can't just go very high into the sky. Then what happens? You return to the branch from where you have taken off. Similarly, the sadhaka who has entered into this bhava pratyaya asampragyata samadhi, as soon as that is over, he's trapped back in samsara. He doesn't have a future. So that is why he sort of is saying mumukshubi here ityartha. This is not a great thing by doing mantras and all which there is not sustainable. And then one more sentence, and then we'll stop there. Shraddha virya smriti samadhi pragya purvaka iteresham. The upaya pratyaya iteresham is, that's why itara means the other one. And he's saying that Shraddha virya smriti samadhi pragya. So these are the causes. You do paravairagya and you have the advantages of what? Shraddha. What is Shraddha? Love and faith in the truth, aspiration for truth, the ability to cling to truth and shun everything else, which might tempt as beautiful and attractive. A lot of psychologists have worked on it, right? Evil is more tempting. That's why you look at movies, the anti-heroes. Anti-heroes are more attractive than plain good people. Good people are boring people, isn't it? It's the complex, the evil characters which fascinate us. And that's what a lot of what people say. I've read some Christianity related books in which they also talk about it, like this god called Black Charm. So why? Because charm is always something dark, because it fascinates the mind, but it stains and it sort of, uh, it kind of desecrates the soul. If we use that word, that soul word is not very, very Indian. So Shraddha Virya. Virya is Utsaha, Shraddha is faith, Smriti. Then you have memory of all these samsaras. You're easily able to remember. Then you say, no, this is not what I wanted. And Samadhi Pragya Purvaka Iteresham. And then Samadhi Pragya. You have also the benefit of Viritamara Pragya and everything. And then you have the benefit of that, that Pratyya Shesha, right? The Sanskara Shesha Anya. So Iteresham. Janma Ausudhi Mantra Tapaha Siddhi Viktiriktanam Atma Anatma Viveka Darshina. Those who do not have the benefit of being born in a very spiritual family or in a very powerful family, like some people become kings or queens, right, in the Middle East, in other parts of the world as well, just because of the birth, not because they're very talented. And Ausati, because of some kind of substance use, mantra, and tapaha, like they might do a lot of kriya yoga, right? And siddha vyatirektanam, and these people don't have these benefits. They are not going into that vyatirektanam, but they have one key thing which others don't have, these sadhakas don't have. What do they have? They have atma, anatma, viveka darshina. They have that clarity of thought, what is truth and what is falsehood. I tell you, how much a sadhana you do, this particular thing doesn't come. I have seen that with a lot of people. I'm not lying. Yeah, I'm feeling I have taken a lot of interest in a lot of other schools of thought. What I found is this ability, that viveka, what is true, what is real, what is unreal, that doesn't come through all other sadhanas. That's why the Vedanta thing sort of gives you some inner peace because it takes you closer to truth. I'm not marketing Vedanta, but I've seen all other sadhanas. Like same with Prasangika Buddhism. It fascinates me because it doesn't say if you do this, you're getting it. They're not tempting you with anything. They're saying all this is actually false and you just try to be truth oriented. And then you reach a state where you lose all temptations and you are not fascinated too much. Okay, very dull theory for the ones who are interested in interesting things. Now, Viveka Darsinam tu yah samadhi saha Shraddhadi Purvakaha. And what is Shraddha? They are born out of Shraddha. Shraddhadeyaha Purva. Okay, Purva means Karana, Upaya Yasya Satata. Shraddhadeya. And Shraddha is the cause of this particular Upaya Pratyaya Ityartha. Tesu Shraddha Yoga Vishaye Chetasa Prasadaha. What is this Shraddha? That happiness, that Prasada Rupa. It's like a gift, it's like a grace that you experience because of this Shraddha. And this is the most beautiful sentence I read here. Sahi Janani Eva Yoginam Pati. You know who is the mother of a sadhaka? Madhusudana Saraswati is writing the most powerful sentence here. Sahi Janani Eva Yoginam Pati. This Shraddha is like a loving mother. If you have that Shraddha, she'll save you like the mother. She may be dead asleep, right? The baby cries. The dad doesn't look at it. The mother, even in her sleep, she wakes up, changes the diapers, feeds the baby. Why? Because she doesn't see the baby as different from her. I mean, this is something biological, right? I mean, we have to accept it. That's just one aspect of reality. It's God given. Now, here, this particular thing cannot be experienced by a man. What she goes through, why she does, there's no intellectualism there. It's just a very biological, intuitive thing. Similarly, this Shraddha, that's why beautifully he's glorifying this. Sahi Janani Eva Yoginam Pati. Somebody who wants to do yoga without having this benefit of a mother is an orphan. Nobody will take care of him. But he has Shraddha. The mother is with him. She raises that child. She raises that yogi like a mother. And with that, we have a couple of more minutes, but I stop here. And then he's saying, Tataha Shraddhadanasya Viveka Arthino Viryam Utsaha Upajayate. Because of this Shraddha, there is Utsaha. Samupajata Viryasya Paschatyasu Bhumishu Smritir Utpadyate. And because of this particular Utsaha, he's able to remember and make comparison what all he has passed through. Okay, I have crossed the time, so I stop here, and so we will stop the streaming here, and then any questions you can ask. I'm sorry for going well beyond the time limit.